Oh, good morning, everybody. Welcome on in. Pickswise, Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports. Jared Smith, Howard Bender, live in Arizona, not live in Arizona. Howard, how is the weather back east? So I can brag a little bit about what's going on here in the desert this week.
Well, I'm Northern California here, Jared. So the
Oh,
the
that's right. You're
weather
not an
actually,
East Coast guy. That's
the
right. I
weather
forgot.
west of you right now is actually it's nice. It's a
Fair.
it's a nice little chilly morning here in San Francisco. It's it's okay. It's not the
Yeah.
desert weather, but I'm okay with that.
I keep forgetting. I don't know why I keep thinking you're East. I think it's because of the New York, sports vibes that you give off a lot. But I do. I have this misconception about you that you're this East Coast, curmudgeon, but really you're a West Coast chill cat.
No,
And
I'm a
that's
curmudgeon.
the
You can
vibes of
stay
the
with
show
that.
today. I could stay with the I could stay with the East Coast curmudgeon. Not an East Coast curmudgeon. Danny Burke, host of the Pro Football betting podcast on VSiN Live and also Bet on Chicago on WLSAM 890. He will be joining us in about 20 minutes or so to talk NFL, Super Bowl, all things happening this week here in Phoenix. We'll also have a lot of NFL talk today. We're going to recap the awards that took place last night here in Phoenix with some interesting names on the list. And then, of course, we'll get into a lot of Super Bowl talk. Maybe we'll throw in some NBA and some college hoops at the end if we have time. But obviously, it is a football Friday. It is the last football Friday of the year. So let's get right into what happened last night. And it's kind of funny. I was texting my Jets group chat last night, Howard, and I said the Jets had, I think, both offensive rookies of the year with Breece Hall, who was probably the de facto until he got hurt, and then Garrett Wilson. And then they had the defensive rookie of the year, Sauce Gardner. Basically, three of the best rookies in the NFL were on the Jets this year, yet they still couldn't find a way to make the playoffs. That was a highlight of the awards ceremony that took place here in Phoenix last night, with Patrick Mahomes being the king of the hill, the MVP now, as he will try to do something that only, I believe, 10 other players have done. Not a lot. Win the MVP and also win the Super Bowl in the same year. It's a very short list. But what was your takeaways from last night? Not only the Jets kind of sweeping the rookie awards, but just the overall honors that we saw. I know you cashed a ticket on Brian Dable to win Coach of the Year, and we got a lot of finality, a lot of closure on the NFL season last night with the awards banquet.
And I think they got the awards right. I really do. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, I mean, how many people were down on Patrick Mahomes coming into the season? No Tyreek Hill. And what did he do? He was like, let me just lead the league in passing yards right now and lead the Chiefs to a 14-3 record. And well, no, I mean, did the Chiefs go out and dominate every single game? No, they didn't, but they found ways to win. Mahomes looked fantastic. He played hurt, played healthy. He looked good. So I was completely fine with that. Offensive player of the year went to Justin Jefferson. Another one I thought, I mean, I kind of thought that maybe they'd give a nod to Jalen Hurts for the way he did step up and maybe throw him offensive player of the year. But the late season injury, I definitely think really kind of took something away from him for that. And when you go to Jefferson, I mean, what do you have? 1,000-yard games this season alone. I mean, he's just, he's otherworldly. He does it with Kirk Cousins as his QB, and that's, I'm not going to say it's a huge drawback, but we know that Cousins is not the be all end all of QBs. The Dayball one, I thought that they nailed that. Absolutely nailed that. And I said this. I said I don't want to take anything away from Nick Sirianni. I think what he did
Yeah.
this year was an absolute fantastic job. He helped Jalen Hurts take his game to another level. But let's face it, you've got Jalen Hurts. You just traded for A.J. Brown. You've got Devonta Smith. Dallas Goedert is a top 5 tight end in the league. And you've got all these beautiful weapons at your disposal. You better win with those. Dayball, he goes in there and he's like down in the coal mines. He's all dirty and everything. He's got to turn Daniel Jones completely around. He has no wide receivers whatsoever. Saquon Barkley, we'd like to see if he comes back and he does, something there. And a defense that couldn't stop the run. So you had to, be on your heels a lot throughout this season. So I think what Dayball did with the Giants to bring them, into the playoffs, I thought was a huge, huge move for him. And I think that it was very deserving. And I think that there's a lot of optimism for the Giants as well as there is for the Jets
Yeah.
sweeping the rookies, So I'm totally in on Daboll getting that Coach of the Year award. And, I'll say it right now. If you play fantasy, sneaky Daniel Jones, that dude's still dropping in drafts, and he could be. I mean, they've been talking about it now. Could Daniel Jones be the next Josh Allen? With Brian Daboll, I think he could.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of the offseason, of course, is how the Giants handle what was a very impressive year. I mean, if you would have asked a lot of people preseason, hey, the Giants are going to be playing on divisional weekend against the team that's in the Super Bowl. And obviously they didn't really compete in that game, and they got just completely dump trucked. But I think a lot of people would say, hey, that's a pretty successful season. And I think of all the votes, of all the awards last night, the Rookie of the Year was the one that definitely stood. I don't know. I didn't have a chance to research this, but the last time a team swept both Rookies of the Year,
was
the future is bright for the Jets.
It was 2017. It was Alvin Kamara and
look at you with the trivia.
Wait. No, because I saw the whole thing and I tweeted it out.
Was it Marshawn Lattimore?
Marshawn Lattimore, yes. So it was Alvin Kamara. Here you go.
Tag team effort.
Right? I'll text it to you, buddy. I promise. So here you go. This one here. Alvin Kamara and Marshawn Lattimore did it in 2017 for the Saints. The only other time in the history of the NFL was 1967 when the Lions had Mel Farr and Lem Barney.
The great Lem Brainey. How could we forget? Yeah, so the Jets did something last night that only two other teams in NFL history have ever done, and yet they still couldn't make the playoffs. But back to the Daboll thing for a moment.
What are you going to do without a quarterback?
I know that's what I texted my friends last night. I said, my Jets group chat, I said, swept both Rookies of the Year, still couldn't make the playoffs. Let's go find a darn quarterback. But the Coach of the Year vote, I thought, was fascinating because, again, we finally got the answers to the test last night. Granted, we couldn't, take the test anymore because the odds for all these markets were closed. But I like to look at the voting because I like to know if our line of thinking on certain awards markets was sound, because I do think understanding, like, this is going to sound like what's his name, the guy from at MSNBC that does all like the voting stuff. I forget his name. Like the voting patterns of the media will help us in future awards markets in the NFL. And what the Coach of the Year voting taught me last night, Brian Daboll and Kyle Shanahan received over half of the first place votes. So everyone thought it was going to be Sirianni. Only got 6 out of 50 first place votes. And to your point, the quality of the quarterbacks of the coaches that won or were in second place, Daboll and Shanahan. Say what you want about the rest of the Niners team, but the quarterback situation, they started 3 different starting quarterbacks this year, actually 4 if you want to count Josh Johnson in any capacity. It was a struggle of a season for the Niners quarterback situation to go from Lance to Garoppolo and then Purdy. And then, of course, you finish with Josh Johnson taking the final snaps and then back to Purdy. And it was a mess. And I think the Daboll situation, of course, with the Giants and with Daniel Jones and how, less talent they had, Coach of the Year, it does not matter who is playing on the team. It only matters, actually, the worse your team, the better chance you have to win Coach of the Year. The worse your quarterback situation is, the better chance you have to win Coach of the Year. So as much as Nick Sirianni and even Sean McDermott, who got 7 out of 50 first place votes, those guys are not going to win Coach of the Year with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen at quarterback. So going forward, when we're analyzing this market, you throw away the teams that have the all-stars at quarterback, even though they might have really good seasons. So again, something to keep in the back of your mind when we're handicapping this award next year. It's fascinating to see how the voters kind of, push their chips into the middle on certain guys. On the other side of the ball, for the MVP, it was a runaway with Patrick Mahomes. He got 48 out of 50 first place votes. It was not even close. And again, his ability to lift his teammates and just be an absolute rock star continues to amaze me. Let's move on to what I think is going to be a very fascinating topic this week. We did also see the Hall of Fame kind of get figured out last night. Hold on, let me pull up the names on the list because I'm curious if you think anyone got snubbed or if anyone maybe should be on the list that maybe isn't. Rondé Barber, Darrelle Revis, Joe Thomas, DeMarcus Ware, Zach Thomas, Dan Coryell, Chuck Horley, Joe Klecko, Ken Riley. Those names on the list. Any of those surprise you? Obviously, some of them I haven't even heard of, but the guys at the top, Barber, Revis, Joe Thomas, DeMarcus Ware, Zach Thomas, I thought is an interesting one. Any of those guys catch your fancy there, Howard?
I don't think anybody really, see, for me, Hall of Fame voting, I think has been diluted over the years. We know that the Hall of Fame voting in any sport has been, it definitely turns political. Do I think Rondé Barber? Do I think of him as like Hall of Fame? No. Did I think that was he a fantastic corner? Yes, he was. And I think that he, was right there at a very proper time. When the Tampa 2 defense was, at its peak. And I think that that's, probably what kind of let it in there. I mean, when I see names like Dan Coryell, I wonder why he didn't get into the Hall of Fame before this. When Chuck Howley is another linebacker who I was like, really? Chuck Howley wasn't in the Hall of Fame already? And I was at the Hall of Fame just last August. And, so that kind of surprised me.
Wow.
But I think, of course, of course, for you and I, as Jets fans, to see Darrelle Revis get in there. Now, again, that was another thing. I was like, Darrelle Revis, ballot. I mean, he was great. See, here's the thing. Like, you see these cover corners. And, we look at these guys, Darrelle Revis, Ndame Asamoah, remember him? These guys get so good that people just stop throwing to them. And all of a sudden their stats don't pile up as much as you'd like to think. And I think that's something that kind of, skews the defensive backs as far as, the voting goes. Does shutting down an entire side of the field every game that you play, does that warrant Hall of Fame status, even though you don't have the pass defenses, stats that some other players do. But so Darrelle Revis getting in, and come on, Joe Klecko. I mean, who doesn't love the old New York sack exchange? You should have just brought in all four of the guys: Klecko, Gastineau, Marty Lyons, Abdul Salam. Put them in there together in the hall. One bust with 4 heads. Give it to me.
I love it. It brings back like the Hall of Fame voting. Obviously, this isn't a gambling discussion. This is just Howard and I reminiscing on good times here. Zach Thomas, I thought, was another one very deserving. He's been on the ballot a while. I mean, growing up as a Jets fan, living in South Florida, Zach Thomas was the bane of my existence for many years. One of the best old school middle linebackers with the neck roll and just that grin, like the snarl on his face. One of those really tough-nosed dudes that you loved him when he was on your team and you hated him when he wasn't. So it's always good to see these things take place. The NFL honors has become kind of the Academy Awards. Like they used to just announce them, all regular, just announce them. Now they do this award-style banquet. It was cool to see a lot of the pageantry last night, especially the DeMar Hamlin tribute. I thought was really touching. It's kind of like the NFL's ESPYs now. They get all the celebrities to come and they do the speeches and the jokes and the stand-up and the monologues. And I even saw, I don't know if you saw the video of Kirk Cousins on stage singing with Kelly Clarkson with his chains on and everything. That was certainly a viral worthy moment, but it's become a spectacle. And I think it's worthy of Super Bowl week because, let's be honest, there is a lot of pomp and circumstance here in town as we get ready to crown a Super Bowl champion. So let's transition into the game itself. Let's get away from our pomp and circumstance, and let's start talking about X's and O's. Eagles and Chiefs. Line hasn't moved at all, as expected. Still hovering around 1.5. It looks like 1-ish and 51-ish is going to be the total. And the closing total, closing side come Sunday. If I had to guess, Howard, I think it'll close Eagles -1. I think it'll close at 51. And I think those are very fair numbers based on the market that we've seen so far over the last 2 weeks. This is a market now that is almost fully matured. Let's start right at the top. Do you have a side or total bet for this game that you would like to share with our audience?
I mean, I really do. Let me ask you this, because I'm curious as to what the vibe is like down there. You're in Glendale right now. I'm in Northern California amongst in a sea of bitter Bay Area fans. So, like, what's
They'll
the
get over it.
vibe down there? I mean, is it split 50-50? Is everybody down there going Eagles, 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 Eagles? What's the vibe in Arizona right now?
I think based off of the media that I've talked to and have discussed with, it's 50-50. I think
Really?
amongst the media, there are some really sharp people that know, hey, this Chiefs team, even though they're the quote unquote underdog in the game, it's really hard to call them an underdog anytime you've got 15 under center. So I think there's a lot of respect for Patrick Mahomes amongst the media here in terms of picking the game. And I would say the media is pretty split. In terms of the public, I've definitely seen more Philly. And for example, I went to a bar last night across the street from where the media center is, very close to where they were holding the NFL honors last night. So it was a fandom, and they were having like a little event for one of the other sports books with multiple professional athletes, be talking with one of the hosts. And so the bar was raucous, and they were doing chants and stuff like that. It was there wasn't any Chiefs green or any Chiefs red in the audience. It was a lot of Philly fans. I think the Philly fandom is more than the Chiefs fandom. I don't know if that'll play out in terms of the attendance of the game on Sunday. The attendance of the game tends to be more corporate than fandoms. But I do think the Philly fans are kind of out in full force this week. Chiefs fans, the Midwesterners, maybe a little nicer, a little quieter, so we don't hear them as much. But I think public is definitely Eagles. I think media is split, if that answers your question.
It definitely does answer my question. I was surprised when you said 50-50 because everybody I talk to is, all it's Eagles, 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 Eagles. And for me, it's very reminiscent of the conference championship for the AFC. Everybody was it was Bengals, 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 Bengals. And what happened, and I said, why are we underestimating Patrick Mahomes? I get, the ankle injury is something to take into effect, but now we're 2 weeks down the road here from that conference championship. And, yes, I think that everybody is pretty much healthy right now. You've got Mahomes' ankle is not an issue. There's no injury designation for him. Is Jalen Hurts' shoulder okay? It's 2 weeks down the road, so maybe it is going to be a little bit better. But I think that there's just far too much public money going in on the Eagles here, which immediately turns me over to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'll take the Chiefs plus the points. I will take the Chiefs on the money line and get plus odds for that one as well. Because I'm sorry, you can't tell me that Andy Reid, who has been here before, Mahomes, who has been here before, 3 out of the last 4 years now. Like, this is their third trip in 4 years to the Super Bowl. They've got the experience. I'm not taking anything away from the talent that is the Eagles defense, the talent that is the Eagles offense, the talent that is Nick Sirianni. But you can't tell me that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes as an underdog is even remotely worth it. So I've got my money on the Chiefs for the win. I will do the points. I will do the money line at plus odds. And you know what's kind of funny? I already took the over at 50.5 because I'm a little worried that it does jump up to 51 because I see this as like one of those, 27-24 type games. I think it's going to be a hard fought battle between these two. I think it's going to be a very close game here, but Chiefs and give me a field goal game with a slight tick on the over.
I like it. I think your reasoning is definitely sound. It's hard to say that there's value on either side of the equation, but we have to pick a winner. I think the best value bet to make in terms of getting the most for your money is the Mahomes MVP bet, which is basically a bet on the Chiefs money line, because there's just no way that the Chiefs win this game and he's not the MVP unless there's like 3 pick sixes or 2 returns for a touchdown or something just so absurd that. But I don't see that playing out in more than like 1 out of a million scenarios, or maybe not that high of a or low of a probability, but it's such a low probability that it's not really in my line of thinking. So Mahomes at plus 130 to win the MVP, I think, is kind of the correlated bet where you get just enough juice for your money. to make the Chiefs bet worthwhile. And I agree. I think the Chiefs win the game. I think this game lands right around the total, which the totals have been pretty good. They've been pretty good at capping these totals this year in the postseason. A lot of the numbers have landed very close. So I think at 51, value says under because of just how much that total's been landed on. But at 50.5, I think definitely a over could be a bet because I do think it'll close 51. And if you bet over 50.5 and it closes 51, that's basically like betting a -2.5 and having it close at 3. That's a very prominent number, very prominent total in the NFL, the most landed on total over the last decade plus. So 51 is the dividing line in the sand for the total. All right, you're the fantasy guy, Howard. So that means props are going to be a prominent part of your Super Bowl card. Feel free to get funky too. Coin toss, Gatorade color, whatever suits your fancy, sir. The floor is yours.
You know what's really funny though? We've had some very long, at length discussions on the national anthem.
Sure,
because I was talking to somebody at on the Fantasy Alarm Show on Sirius XM. And we were playing the prop contest and just kind of going through it and saying, what we're going to try out and whatever. And I was like, listen, 2 minutes, 1 second, it was 121 and a half seconds for the national anthem. I'm like, this is Chris Stapleton, he's just down home and he's, country guy, I think he just kind of wants to get down to business. And, he's not like Christina Aguilera, who's like, on every single note. And then all of a sudden I got bombarded. Have you ever listened to Chris Stapleton? Just go listen to Tennessee Whiskey. It takes him 4 hours to get one note out. And I mean, so I've got people that are fighting with me on that. I don't listen. If it's a fun contest like we are throwing over at Fantasy Alarm right now, fantasyalarm.com/big game. It's free to enter and it's got all those goofy props in there. But I mean, if you're looking to, make some money on the Super Bowl and have, some skin in the game. Yeah, there are definitely a couple of them that I really like. And you got to shop around. You definitely shop around your props, and I think that this is something that you guys have probably said at length to people when you are betting your props. You don't want to go all willy-nilly. This isn't a tube of Pringles where you can't just have one and the next thing you know, you find yourself at the bottom of the tube and you're like,
I struggle with getting my fingers in, Howard, to get to grab. I need like one of those.
Just give it to me there. Just pour it.
I hope we don't make that a meme, by the way. Let's erase what I just said from memory. But I need like one of those like grabbers to like get in at the bottom of the Pringles jar. It's tough to get down there, man. It really is.
It you know what? Not when you're prop betting, because it's way too easy to just start throwing it out. So my suggestion is, as always, follow your narrative. Think about how you think this game is going to go. Do you think the Eagles are going to, come out fast? Do you think the Chiefs are going to come out fast? Like, pick your narrative, set the game up in your mind, and make your picks from there. So, A.J. Brown for me, I got a plus 125 for an anytime touchdown for A.J. Brown at PointsBet. Meanwhile, he's like at plus 105 on the DK Sportsbook. So always make sure that you're shopping around, you're finding the best things that fit your narrative. So while I'm taking 100%. The Chiefs on the money line, my props, I'm looking at things like A.J. Brown is an anytime touchdown. I love that matchup. Doesn't matter if it's Snead or McDuffie who's on him. He's going to get that separation. He's going to get that big play. I absolutely love that. I think that because I think the Chiefs win, I think we see more Kenneth Gainwell in the second half as the pass catching back. I think that the way you neutralize guys like Frank Clark and Carlos Dunlap and, even Chris Jones is that you run it to the outside. You dump off the screens to the outside. So Kenneth Gainwell, 11.5 receiving yards, 1.5 receptions. I've got the over on both of those, along with my A.J. Brown anytime touchdown. I agree with you on the Pat Mahomes for the MVP. I'm not dabbling into any props with the Chiefs offensive players. None. As much as I love and respect Isaiah Pacheco, as much as I love and respect Travis Kelce, I mean, the Eagles are going to double team Kelce. They're going to try and take him out of the equation as much as they possibly can. I don't think they fully will, but they're going to try. So I think Mahomes is going to be doing a lot of spreading the ball around. I'll look at maybe, his pass attempts. I think that was at like 30 and a half. No, it was higher than that. But I'm kind of staying away from that realm on the Chiefs side. So A.J. Brown, anytime touchdown. Give me Kenneth Gainwell over 11 and a half receiving yards, over 1.5 receptions. And how about this one here? You want a little fun one? We'll give you a little fun one. The jersey number of the first touchdown scorer. Under 11 and a half. Give it to me there, because I'm looking at A.J. Brown as being that first touchdown, as being that number 11. And, I can neither confirm nor deny that I sprinkled a little on A.J. Brown also at plus 950 for the first touchdown of the game.
I love it. And the jersey number is a fun one. I'm going to take a hard look at that later. Let's continue the conversation right now with Danny Burke, host of the Pro Football Betting Podcast on VSiN Live, and Bet on Chicago on WLSAM 890. Danny, let's just start with the props, since that's kind of been the vibe of the last few minutes here. Have you bet? What's been your favorite part of the week in terms of handicapping the prop market? Because I'll be honest, I think the prop market has become more impactful than actually handicapping the game itself. That's all I hear this week. What props are you on? Who's going to score the first touchdown? Who's going to be the MVP? All of those things have become very prominent parts of the conversation.
Yeah, and look, as you guys know, when we've had this time together on the show, I mean, I'm always looking into props, and this week in particular, it always gets a tad bit more intriguing because you have a plethora more options available to you. And for a lot of them, you really got to jump in early before the line kind of gets settled to where it should be. But there is still some value available. And I will say, aside from just kind of the ones that you could bet in some of the other games, there's probably, let me see, there's probably like two that, well, I'll say three. So there's like three that I bet that I obviously wouldn't normally bet in another situation. For example, I like over 2.5 players to attempt to pass at plus 150. This line I originally saw as high as plus 165. The reason there's a couple reasons for this. One, the obvious one would be, well, you're assuming there's going to be some kind of trick play instilled into the philosophy of one of these offenses. Probably with Kansas City, they already are coming in with the underdog role and that type of mentality, knowing their defense may be a liability. And Philly's defense has really just been outstanding, especially in the secondary this year. You may need to overcome it by doing some kind of trick play. So you could have another guy throw it that way. Another option to have that happen, both of these quarterbacks are a little bit banged up, right? I mean, Hurts is too, so is Patrick Mahomes. Maybe they take a rough hit and have to sit out for a series, and then you're going to have Chad Henne or Gardner Minshew at least throw one pass. So there's a lot of different options that could happen for that prop to come through. Look, if it was like lower than plus 140, I probably wouldn't entertain it, but I like the value you're getting at plus 150 or above. So over 2.5 players to attempt to pass is what I did. And then two other ones that, again, these are more just kind of like wonky ones, but I think they're kind of fun and have some good value. Last play of the game, QB Neal, no. So the last play of the game to not be a quarterback Neal, I took the no at 2-1. BetMGM, I believe, had that here in Illinois. Other books had it as low as like plus 150. So for the fact that the one book had 2-1, I had to take a little bit of a flyer on that. And look, the point spread's indicating that this is going to be a close back and forth game. And certainly that's how we could finish, with one team either trying to win, trying to tie it, whatever it may be. So you never know. At 2-1, it's kind of worth at least maybe half a unit of your standard bet if you want to get involved. And then same with this other bet that I believe only one book had it at Bet Rivers, over 1.5 coaches challenges. Plus 254 was the price for this. I thought that was a little high. I thought it would be a little bit lower than that. So again, it's not like you necessarily have the statistics to back those last two up, but it's something where you rarely see it. It looks like some good value, and it absolutely could happen. I mean, plus 254 for both of these coaches in a high offensive power game to throw the challenge flag in the most important game of the season. Why couldn't we see that happen?
Why couldn't we see that happening? I'm with you on that one for sure. Listen, I think there's a lot of why couldn't we see that happening here in the in this game. Danny, let me ask you a question here because we've got the two teams out there who led the league in sacks. The Eagles were number one. You had the Chiefs at number two. So respectively, number one in each of their conference. I see, some juice on Chris Jones, some juice on Hassan Reddick. But when you start looking at other guys like Frank Clark out there, like there's a lot of plus money floating around here on the sacks. And we've been talking about both these teams' pass rushes for the last 2 weeks. You thinking about sprinkling a little something on some sack totals?
Personally, I'm not, but I wouldn't tell anybody to steer away from it because you're right. I mean, Philadelphia has been tremendous in that category. They're second highest in pressure rate and obviously dominating when it comes to putting pressure on the quarterback and getting the sacks itself. And look, I would probably, in the obvious answers, to be a little bit more inclined to look at some players within Philadelphia's defensive front. And like you said, maybe search for some value aside from the obvious answer with Hassan Reddick. And the game goes on as it progresses, the ankle may get a little bummed out a tad bit, may get hit, may get affected. So he'll be limping a tad bit, even though they have had 2 weeks off. And then the offensive game plan changes the deeper you get into this event. And they may be trailing and need to throw it more. And he'll be looking for answers deep, more time, getting pressured, getting sacked, all those things. Whereas you're looking at Philadelphia, this is an offense, especially if you, like in general, if someone believes that they are going to win this game, they're probably going to do it by running the ball. That's been the nature of their offense the entirety of the season. And Kansas City doesn't have the most stout run defense. So Jalen Hurts really isn't throwing the ball all that often, maybe like 30 to 32 times a game. And yeah, Chris Jones could easily be the guy to do it. But again, they're going to try to take Jalen Hurts out of those options or opportunities as much as possible that may be allowing him to suffer a sack, because that's going to be a huge boost for this Chiefs defense that has not been that consistent this year. So I think if you do want to dive into that realm, you probably go more with the Philly side of things. And yeah, if you want to do Reddick, go for it. But I personally would look for a guy with a little bit more value, especially because Mahomes is going to be slinging it a lot more than Hurts is.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point about the amount of opportunities the Eagles will get to sack the quarterback compared to the amount of opportunities that the Chiefs will, because Jalen Hurts might not be throwing it as much. But that's if it's a positive game script for the Eagles. Maybe it won't be.
Right.
And I think the game script will dictate who will have more sacks in the game, just like it normally does, because if the Eagles are behind, they've got to throw more than Jalen Hurts wants to and Nick Sirianni wants to. Jalen Hurts has been one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league this year. His pressure to sack ratio is actually one of the highest, whereas Patrick Mahomes. So we talk about defenses a lot when we're trying to handicap the sack market, but you have to handicap the quarterbacks as well. Patrick Mahomes has the lowest pressure to sack ratio in the entire NFL. He is the best quarterback in the league at avoiding sacks. So as much as the Eagles' defensive line is absolutely part of the equation, the other part of the equation is the actual quarterback you are trying to sack in that particular game. And in this case, Jalen Hurts is a much easier quarterback to sack than Patrick Mahomes. At least that's what the numbers say this year. That's where the Eagles have been. In fact, besides Tom Brady, I don't think any quarterback in the league in the last 5 years has been more difficult to sack than Patrick Mahomes. I might be wrong on that number, but it's very tight between Brady and Mahomes as guys that are just very difficult to get to. All right, side and total wise, I mean, it's a tough conversation. It's a conversation that I think we're having a lot less of these days in this particular game, but it's about as tight of a game in terms of the side as you're going to see in any Super Bowl probably ever. Eagles still favored by 1.5. I think this number closes at 1, which is what the look ahead was over at the Westgate a couple weeks ago. So you can't really get much tighter than that, right, Danny? If you had to pick a side, if you had to pick a total in this game, I guess you can just give me your final score prediction as well. What would be your move?
I'll just get this one out of the way. I didn't bet anything with the total, but if I had to make a play, I guess I would lean a little bit toward the under. And of course, the longer you wait on that, the chances you're probably getting a higher number if you want to go toward the under will be. But in terms of a side, I did make a bet. I actually bet Kansas City catching 2 in this game. And look, I'm not going to, and I've been saying this, of course, we all have for the past couple of weeks, but I'm not going to hang my hat on just the complete narrative of Philadelphia and their lack of strength within their schedule. Although, does it play a factor? Absolutely. But on the other side, more importantly, I think we're neglecting the fact that this is the third time Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are making a trip to the Super Bowl, right? They have been chiseled with adversity, not just this season, but for the past several years, and they have had this experience leading up into this point. And even though Patrick Mahomes is a little bit banged up, even though, yeah, on the field, Philadelphia matches up incredibly well, pound for pound, position for position, metrically. I mean, I get it. They have all the advantages. And it's not, again, even just a thing like, man, seldom are you catching Mahomes, catching a couple points in a big game. You have to bet it. No, that's not the case. It's just you truly have the better spots in what I think are two of the most crucial positions, and most people would agree with, quarterback and head coach, and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And Andy Reid and Mahomes certainly had that sting from the last Super Bowl that they took part in. In Philadelphia, I mean, yeah, say what you want about the strength of the schedule, but I think it's more so the fact that they just haven't felt the pressure of a situation like this. I mean, the best quarterback they faced this season was Aaron Rodgers, let's be honest. And this was Aaron Rodgers, one of his worst seasons in quite some time. And then you had the easiest road to the playoffs against Daniel Jones, who only performs well against the Minnesota Vikings. And then you played against Josh Johnson, a four-string quarterback, and Brock Purdy, you couldn't even throw the ball. And it's not like they don't deserve to be here. They've absolutely been the top team throughout the NFC, but we all know this has been widely regarded as one of the weakest NFCs in quite some time. But the thing, too, getting back to it, is like the one game that they really felt the pressure was against the Washington Commanders. And that's because Washington did such, and what I mean with Jalen Hurts playing quarterback, and what Washington did such a great job of is controlling time of possession and really being methodical about handing the ball off and just controlling the rock in that regard and keeping it out of the hands of Philadelphia. And then Philadelphia wasn't able to score immediately and often and get up to a sizable lead. They had to play from behind, and that changes their whole game script, and they really can get flustered if that's the case. And if that's going to happen in the biggest game where you don't have that experience, you haven't had that pressure this postseason, who knows what kind of reaction Jalen Hurts is going to have? Who knows what kind of reaction this is going to cause throughout their offensive game plan? Because like I was saying, I mean, this team, if they can, they're going to ground and pound you all the way to the end. And it's not like if they pass it, it's going to fail. They have the weapons to do it. It's just Jalen Hurts has not done it consistently. And look, Jared, I mean, you said it. Look, if they have to pass the ball more and it is Kansas City leading, maybe that sets up Hurts to having more pressure on him in the pocket, and that could fluster him in that way too. So look, I like catching a couple points here with Kansas City. It's not one of those things where I'm going to be fighting to the death to tell you that you should bet Kansas City over Philadelphia, because of course there's a million reasons why you should go on the side of Philadelphia. I just like being on the side of these guys, being Reed, being Mahomes, being Kelsey, who have done this several times now, and they're going up against a team that I don't think has really felt the pressure that they are going to feel in this game.
Great stuff, Danny Burke.
I love that.
Time. Oh, sorry, no, go ahead. One more, Howard.
Oh, no. I love that narrative. One quick one then, because you know what, you're identifying that about Washington was a great point. And let's face it, if you or me or Jared can identify that aspect of it, does Andy Reid identify that aspect, and does that possibly tick you on the over of Isaiah Pacheco's rushing yards prop? I think last I saw it was only at like 50.5 yards. And if Kansas City does want to try and control it a little bit more, do we look to Pacheco as that guy?
100%. That's actually what I did. But what I did instead is I actually did his rushing and receiving. The issue with that one now is that the number has moved a little bit out of control. So not this week, but the week prior, I took him over 63.5 rushing and receiving. And that number is like up to 68.5, I think, consensus. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. And unless you got it like 65.5, then I'd still play it. But like you were alluding to as well, if you get like 50.5 or below, I would just play his rushing yards over at that point, because this has been the Achilles heel of Philadelphia's entire team, really, and how teams have tried to expose it is by running the ball against them. I mean, they've been allowing 4.6 yards per carry, and over the playoffs, at least the last 3 games they played, again, was the secondary members of the Giants again, and then the 49ers. Those tailbacks were getting 5 yards per carry, and they have improved incrementally throughout the course of this season in terms of containing the run. And look, Kansas City isn't a run-first team. That's not what they're going to do. And even if it's successful at the beginning stages of this game, they're too tempted with Mahomes to not throw the ball. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good opportunity for Pacheco. So I'm with you here. I would bet him over 50.5 or lower. Again, I did over 63.5 rushing and receiving. And it was kind of weird. It was an aberration that he had 5 catches and 59 receiving yards against the Bengals, but I don't think it's necessarily recency bias. I think that can be attributed to going up against a solid defense, right? And Mahomes having pressure, the secondary limiting his weapons, him having to scramble, or, when he's trying, he's a little prohibited because of his ankle. All right, what's the safe, secure option? It's a check down to a guy in Isaiah Pacheco who's getting over 50% of the snap counts as opposed to Jerick McKinnon. So Pacheco has proven himself to be a guy that they trust a lot, both in the running game and the receiving game. So I think he could certainly be utilized in both, and I like that angle. So, yeah, I bet that.
Nice.
Danny Burke, thanks for coming on, bud. Host of the Pro Football Betting Podcast on VSiN Live and Bet on Chicago on WLS AM 890. Good luck with your picks, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Appreciate it, gentlemen. You too. Take care.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, let's bet it. Presented by our friends at Superbook Sports. Pile up the wins, pile up the money with Superbook right now. It is the best betting app in Las Vegas, giving you free money every week when you make a bet. Just place a $50 bet each week with Superbook, and they will give you a $5 bonus up to $50 for betting each week afterwards. Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Nevada, New Jersey, or Tennessee. Download the Superbook app or visit superbook.com to get your streak started today. All right, Howard, the time is now, my friend. You will not be with us on Sunday, so we will give you a chance to tee up your play of the day, or as we like to call it, the play of the bowl for Super Bowl 57. Please, sir, enlighten me.
You know what? I've been riding this one the entire 2 weeks. I am all in on the narrative here. Kansas City ranks 31st in DVOA against the number 1 wide receiver. Both L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie, primarily slot corners. They've rotated them back and forth between who's in the slot and who's on the outside. I think they both need to be on the outside against Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. I think that's going to give a nice little advantage to A.J. Brown. If you're giving me plus 125 for an anytime touchdown, I'm there for him. I absolutely love it. The jersey number gimmick and the and the first touchdown score, that's for funsies. I will sprinkle, half unit on that just for the sake of doing it. But, the one that I'm locking down in, and I'll bet it on the, to the max here, is my A.J. Brown anytime touchdown at plus 125. I think he gets into the box.
Love it. Into the box. What's in the box? A.J. Brown. All right, I am going to the I need to go watch that movie now. All right, I will give you a Horizon League bet tonight in college hoops. We're gonna lay 3.5 with Youngstown State at Purdue Fort Wayne. Listen, this Youngstown State team, the Penguins are kind of waddling their way into postseason relevancy. Jared Calhoun's done a fantastic job with this Youngstown State team. They're 19-6 on the year. They've won 4 in a row. They're coming off a big – actually, the last 2 games for them, they beat Wright State in triple overtime, and then they absolutely blew the doors off Northern Kentucky, a very good Northern Kentucky defense that we've discussed on this show. We've bet on this show multiple times, and they dropped 74 on again, a very good Northern Kentucky defense. So I think this Youngstown State team, top 40 in offensive efficiency, top 20 in EFG percentage, facing a Purdue Fort Wayne team tonight that just kind of struggles in all phases. The one thing that scares me, and this is always the great equalizer in college basketball, Purdue Fort Wayne does rely on the 3 a lot. And they shoot it, they're kind of an average shooting team. But Youngstown State, their one weakness is defensively, they've been known to give up some threes. And so this IPFW team, which again, about 50% of their points comes from 3-point land. If they are hot from the arc, it will absolutely spoil this bet. And I could see the Mastodons winning outright. But I'm kind of riding the hot hand here with Youngstown State. Again, they've won 4 in a row, coming off of, I would say, their best win of the year by 18 over a very good and gritty Northern Kentucky team. So I will take a chance that Youngstown can keep it rolling tonight on the road. The Penguins waddle their way into Fort Wayne and pick up a win. So we will lay 3.5 with Youngstown State tonight in the Rising League. And also, don't forget, we have an exciting announcement for Super Bowl week. Pickswise giving away $1,000 to one lucky member of Pickswise Nation with our big game parlay builder contest. All you have to do is make 6 picks about what will happen in the Super Bowl, spread, total, player props, including Mahomes' passing yards prop. If you pick all 6 correctly, you'll be entered to win a $1,000 cash prize. Use the link in the Pickswise bio to sign up for free. Howard, are you going to compete in the? Are you eligible to compete?
I was going to say, am I eligible for that?
I don't know. I just read it, so I feel like anyone who listened to me, if there anyone's out there, is eligible, right?
I'm going to give it a whirl, and I'll probably hit the whole thing, and then they'll be like, "Oh, sorry, Howard, we can't give that to you."
Well, you know what? Worst case scenario is you win, and then you give it to somebody else, and then you have your own personal Howard Bender contest where you could give away $1,000 to a. That's got a nice ring to it right there. It's been an honor, bud. It's been a great week, and I appreciate you hopping on today. And talk to me, final thoughts on Super Bowl 57 before we sign off here.
Enjoy the game. Don't get crazy about it. Be sensible with your betting. Be sensible with your picks. Have some fun with your props, and just enjoy it. And don't watch any of these leaks for the commercials. Don't enjoy the game as it's supposed to be. Don't buy into the modern technology of the spoilers and stuff like that. So, and go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs. Fantastic advice from a fantastic human. That's Howard Bender, our fantasy alarm guru. I'm Jared Smith. We appreciate you hopping on today with us here on Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports. Have a great day.